Hello, today we have a charcoal sketch of an old stone well. A very interesting subject to draw and lots of interesting things to talk about, whether we're talking about textures or how to draw stones or light source, shading, shadows or edges. Once I start drawing, the reference photo is going to be in the top left corner. If you're interested in any of these topics, or if you just want to watch a nice sketch with some relaxing music, keep watching. Okay, let's do a sketch starting with a graphite pencil. It's going to be around here in the middle. And first I'm going to do the sides. Make it about this long and this high. Like I said, the reference photo is there on the top left corner. I'm gonna make some changes to it, obviously. This is the hole or the opening. No need for too much precision. This is going to be the bottom. The well itself is complex in the sense that it consists of many of these smaller stones, but right now I'm not worried about that. Right now I'm focused on the general shape. So first we're going to do the bigger shapes, and then we're gonna move on with the smaller shapes and smaller detail. So now I picked up my charcoal pencil. It's a medium charcoal pencil. I generally use woodless charcoal pencils most of the time because they're easier to sharpen, they break less often. And I'm using this medium charcoal pencil to start working on the overall shape and maybe do a little bit of initial shading. The outer edge is going to be here, but I'm going to be shading around the well as well because I want the contrast between the background and the well. I'm going to want the top part of the well to appear lighter than the background. The opening is very irregular. It's not a circle. It has a lot of these cracks. And you can see that I'm not exactly using a straight line or clean lines. I'm just deliberately trying to create jagged edges. Now, eventually I will want to have clean edges in some of these places, but I can clean that up later. So the light source is going to be coming from more or less the top left, and this side is going to be darker, and the top of the well is going to be a lot lighter. This part here, I want it to be a little darker. But not completely black, obviously. So now I'm shading the sides of the well. I'm gonna want a lot of contrast between the sides and the top side, the top part, which is receiving a lot of light. It's getting light directly from above. So the edge is kind of irregular and jagged. This part here, this area here, needs to be the darkest, and going a little bit lighter towards the right side because because of the light source. So you can sort of imagine that the well is facing a light source which is moved slightly to the left, and that's why the darkest bit, the darkest area, is around the middle but slightly to the right, so the opposite of our light source, or our imagined light source, right? Now the texture looks pretty rough and I have to blend it a little bit, but I'm gonna want to do this very gently, because I'm planning to do some highlights later with an eraser, so I don't really want to push the charcoal too hard into the paper. So I'm going to have to be gentle with it. By the way, the paper that I'm using right now is Fabriano sketching paper, and it's A5 size. I just find it very useful for these smaller sketches, smaller demonstrations. Right now I'm using a dirty tortilla to shade around the outer edge of the well, because like I said, I want to shade and draw the background as well, to have some contrast between the top side of the well and the background, because the background is going to be darker and the top part of the well is going to be a lot lighter because it's getting light from above. But the good thing about this paper is that it will allow me to retain some of that rough texture, which is what I want when drawing stones. Although any type of paper will produce some kind of texture, all you have to do is just go over it with a charcoal pencil and let the pencil work for you. It will create some texture naturally. All you have to do is not to blend it in too much. So now I'm trying to create some value in the background. I'm gonna spread just a tiny bit of charcoal on the top part of the well as well, because I don't want it to be completely white. So now I'm just gonna continue working on the background. I'm gonna draw some grass in the background, and I'm not gonna leave those lines like that. I'm gonna blend them in later and soften it where I want to. And also at the base of the well there's gonna be some smaller stones and little rocks and grass and dirt. So I want some irregular shapes there, and I want some textures and illusion of detail. So I'm just going to be scribbling around there a little bit and creating some of these irregular shapes, which are going to be individual stones. I'm kind of going to try to shade around them and leave them a little bit lighter so that they stand out as separate objects, so that the ground is a little bit more interesting. Well, you can see that I'm already deviating from my reference photo. Obviously, I didn't plan to stick to it in the first place, but it's just there to give me some ideas about what the well is supposed to look like, and so that I can plan my composition more easily. So you can see that I've drawn a little bit of grass and some rocks in the back, and I'm blending that in and trying to make it look like ground that has spots of grass and a little bit of dirt and stones here and there. So grass that's kind of short and not very thick. And this is going to be a vignette, so you can see that I'm fading the edges of that background that I created. The background is only there to allow us to focus on the well and to provide enough contrast for the well to stand out. Generally, whatever you want to be the focus, you want to create more contrast there, and when you want something to draw less attention, you create less contrast and less detail and texture as well. So I'm going to have a little bit more texture and contrast in the foreground, and the grass behind the well is going to be a little bit blurrier. And the well itself, because it's the focus of our drawing, is going to have the most contrast and the most detail and texture, and cleaner edges as well. This part is a little bit blurry. My camera went slightly out of focus. Let's hope it won't last too long. So you can see that I'm also using my tortillon to draw some of these blades of grass on the edges to make the vignette more convincing and better looking. I don't want too much texture and sharp edges around there. And now I've grabbed my kneaded eraser, molded it a little bit, and I'm trying to lift up some of the charcoal from some of these stones to make them stand out a little bit more. I'm using a combination of a dabbing motion and a dragging motion. I've talked about that before. When you drag, the kneaded eraser tends to pick up a little more and create cleaner lines. When you dab, it tends to soften the area a little bit and tends to create softer transitions, but it does remove a bit of charcoal in both cases. I'm also going to grab this pencil eraser to draw some of the finer details. I'm going to draw some of these lighter blades of grass here and there, and maybe do a few touches on the stones as well, because I'm going to want the base or the lower portion of the well to be integrated with the ground, so that it doesn't look like it's just pasted on top of it. Now comes the fun part, because as you can see, I created a fairly dark area around the sides of the well, but not so dark so that these lines that I'm creating now won't be visible. So I'm creating darker value within dark value. This is a very nice touch if you want to create realistic drawings, when you create these even darker tones within the areas of your objects which are already in the shadow. Or the dark side of your objects. Because it adds even further to the illusion of depth and volume. But what I'm doing right now is creating these irregular, or trying to draw these irregular stones, because as you can see even in my reference photo, the stones, the individual stones out of which the well is made, are a very, very irregular shape. So I'm trying to do the same thing. I'm not worried about how they look exactly in my reference photo. I'm just creating my own texture and my own individual stones. I'm just trying to make them look irregular and jagged, but to further refine that, I'm gonna do some highlights on these stones as well to make them stand out a little bit more and to make them look a little bit more realistic. So now I'm gonna do a little bit of texture and a little bit of these cracks on the top part of the well. I want that part to have a little bit of texture as well, but these lines must not be too conspicuous, because this is the lightest part of the object, and I'm creating some stones on the inside wall as well, and trying to make the outer edge look irregular and jagged, so adding a few cracks here and there. I think these stones around the well are a nice touch. So now that I've done most of those individual stones and drawn these cracks, now I'm just gonna blend this a little bit, just a little bit. I don't want to spoil the lines in my texture. Alright, I have several things to do now. First, I need to clean up some of these edges. I need a clean edge here, and I need a clean edge here. I need more contrast there. I also need to integrate the well into the background by adding a little bit of shadow here. And then I need to do a little bit more work on the texture on top, as well as on these stones here, to make them look a little more interesting and a little more 3D. So let's see if we can do that. The clean edge is extremely important here, because we need to show exactly where the object ends and that it is a separate object from the background. If it's blurry, it's not going to look very convincing and very realistic. Let's see if I can clean up this edge as well. I do hope that my eraser won't fail me. There, that's a little bit better. You know what? Maybe. Nobody said that I have to clean up the edge just using an eraser. I can also use my pencil. Okay. So I want this, so since the light source is coming from sort of here, I want this area here to be the darkest, and this area here a little bit lighter, and this area here should be even lighter. So let's see if I can sharpen this eraser. Add a few highlights on the inside of the wall of the well. Now, since these are separate, these rocks, stones that the well is made of are separate objects, I should shade them accordingly. Maybe just shade the upper edge a little bit here and there, because that's where the light source is coming from. And also add a few of those highlights even in this darker area, but make it a little less light. But I need to have these highlights just to make some of these stones stand out as well. An occasional highlight in there gives an illusion like some of the rocks are jutting out, and therefore more light is falling on top of them. So it adds to the illusion that we are looking at a very irregular, rough object, where some bits are sticking out. All right. Probably shouldn't overdo it. I'm gonna try to draw a few of these blades of grass around the well and use a tortillon a little bit to work on the edges a little bit. Just a little bit more texture on top. And now I want to shade the ground to the right of the well a little bit, because that's where the shadow will be, the casted shadow from the well on the ground. But I still want to have some texture and some objects visible in that shadow. I don't want it to be too dark, but it has to be a little bit darker so that it looks like the well is a part of that scene, not just hovering on top of it. So I'm going to shade this part, but I do want to leave a little bit of texture, like there are some stones and grass in that shade there. I'm just refining some of these cracks and working a little bit on that shadow, and maybe adding a few touches of charcoal pencil to some of these stones here, because I want them just a little bit darker. Now I'm sort of going over some of these areas in the foreground with my charcoal pencil, just a little bit, very, very lightly, just to add a little bit of texture. Just going to fade some of the edges a little bit. Just cleaning it up a little bit, and now I'm gonna remove the tape and spray it with a little bit of fixative and maybe do a few final touches and then sign it. Alright, here I already sprayed it with a fixative. I use a Kohinoor fixative. It works well with charcoal and graphite. Just gonna add a little bit of value here, very soft, and maybe here. Now I'm gonna do a few of these cracks a little bit. I'm using a black colored pencil, by the way, for these details. Now I'm going to sign the drawing here, a small signature, and that's it. That's the finished drawing. I'm going to zoom in a little bit so that you can see the detail a little bit better. I just want this area a little bit lighter, and here as well, a few touches. So that's it, that's the finished drawing. So that was my drawing of an old stone well, that thing that people used to get their water from in the past. It was an interesting subject to draw because it allowed me to talk about some important concepts related to drawing, such as light source, shading, shadows, value, contrast, big shapes, smaller shapes, detail, texture, etc. I hope you found some of it useful or entertaining, and I'm going to see you in the next video, which is probably going to be about drawing trees again. Give me a like, subscribe, click the notification icon. There's worse things on YouTube you can watch, so thank you for watching and bye for now.